If I would have saw that in a crystal ball, I probably would have picked the thing up and shattered it and said, what is this? What is this black magic? Get out of my house.
I wanted to start off by talking about a scene because it at least to me, it really speaks to kind of the high level of difficulty that goes into making the show. And that was in episode 6 when Ted is told that Jamie's going to sit out of practice because of an injury, supposedly, that he has. And he goes in to confront him about it, and he gives this kind of impromptu speech that has a lot of allusions to the Allen Iverson speech about practice. And we're talking about practice, and we're talking about a franchise player and that whole thing.
No, we talking about practice, man. Practice. You know you're supposed to be out there. You know you're supposed to lead by example. You're just shoving that all aside. And so here we are, Jamie. We're talking about practice. Not a game. Not the game. We're talking about practice with your team, with your teammates. The only place that we get to play together, we got control over. Rest of the time, it's us 11 against those 11.
And to me, like that scene works so well because whether or not you know that connection that it has with Allen Iverson, it really plays in the moment. But it also runs the risk of kind of going off the board and just only being about that reference and only being about that moment, depending on how it's shot and played and orchestrated. So could you just talk a little bit about how that scene came about and where the speech kind of originated?
I know that I wanted to use AI's, Allen Iverson's practice speech. I had always seen it in the press conference as Allen, did it in real life, and just as like a comedic flip, like just Ted talking about the virtues of practice, but do it word for word, which we more or less did. It's not illusions. I mean, he should actually contact the Writers Guild and make a lament, or I'll happily just buy him dinner. But he and I are the same age, and when I was a senior in high school, I played basketball, and he was the best basketball player in the country. And then he wasn't able to play his senior year because of a scuffle he had in Virginia Beach. I think it was where he was from before heading to Georgetown. So he's always been a guy that I was on my radar long before the speech. Like in episode 105 is when Jamie really, calls Ted out, and Ted's about to yell at him, but then his son comes in. And that's a thing that we talk about on the show a lot, about how we can be each other's angels and save each other from certain moments. And that you'll see it throughout, certainly the first season and second season, where people, someone swoops in at just the right moment before someone heads to a dark place.
Jamie Tartt, Jamie Tartt,
As undeniably catchy as that tune is, I need you to cut the crap right now. Hey, big guy, there he is. Hey.
Make an incorrect choice. So Ted's about to have this squabble with Jamie in 105. So emotionally, it had been teed up. And then I remember a couple days before, it may have been the night before, I was like, oh shit. Like it just hit me, where I was like, oh, the Iverson speech. And it's going to be in protest, not comedy. And that's a lesson that I feel I learned personally from like Monty Python films, like Life of Brian or Holy Grail. Like I am not I don't know King Arthur. I don't know those stories, and I don't have I was raised Catholic, but I don't have a deep understanding like those fellows going to Oxford and Cambridge. I went to Fort Scott Community College. And so there are levels to those movies that if you know those references, religion or Knights of the Round Table, and they score on that level. We do those with soccer jokes all the time, but then the other times they're just funny. It's just good wordplay. It's just clever, great acting, great great ensemble. So here it was like the reference was by no means ever played to me as funny. I was like maybe the most lauding, the moment or the idea would be clever. Like maybe because someone would say, oh, it's clever, but it was repurposing what I feel was a protest song by Allen Iverson in that moment, turned into an opera and charged it with more emotion. And then the other thing that's going on there, and I think part of the reason it popped in my head as being a perfect spot for it, is one, the bed that was laid emotionally for Ted and Jamie in 105 that was then cut short by his son's appearance in the locker room, and then loving Jamie, and happy to see him and having him sign his whole jersey, and Ted being like, was the whole episode, is there's the theme of semantic satiation, of using a word over and over and it losing its meaning. And Ted says practice more than he says plan or ace. And yet every time it's with this burning hot intensity and intention. And it's because it was boiling under there. And yes, he's maybe some displacement there because of what happened with him and his wife. but it was like, oh, this is exactly where it's supposed to be. This is why it hadn't been in the show. This is why we hadn't written the scene prior. We didn't have, we didn't write the comedy press conference yet. Like, it just, sometimes when you stay open to these things, if you don't try to hold on to anything too tightly, you don't know, you can't hold water in a closed fist. You got to cup your hand like that. And so we're just cupping these moments gently, and then it just arrived as that thing. And so it really was about semantic satiation and having to put Jamie in his place. We talked about like, what is the intention here? What is the intention? Like, is it a comedy moment? And for me, what I thought was neat is the same way that the Allen speech has been misrepresented in popular culture. He was angry about being asked about practice, and he says it right then and there, but he's also dealing with the death of a very close friend. And it's put him in a box in people's mind. And yet it's a singular moment from a very, very, any of us are complex enough. And it's just been like, oh, he wasn't a practice player. It's like, no. He's one of the hardest competing people in sports. To be 6'1" and dominate like as he did in the NBA at that time in the NBA is astounding. And he was like, what are you asking me about this? I'm dealing with real pain and you're asking me about practice.
I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice? We're talking about practice, man. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. We ain't talking about the game. We're talking about practice, man.
And so the fact that people watch that scene and some people laugh at it, some people get the reference, some people don't. Like, it feels like this meta sort of moment that, again, we're only writing the show from the intention by which the story we're trying to tell. The fact that people have clued in on it so much has been astounding. I mean, it's the closest I think I'll ever feel to, like, personally for me, as like a songwriter, the power to like write your emotions out after a breakup or something good happening, or coming up with a hook and then turning a microphone to Madison Square Garden and have them sing it back to you. Lordy, no wonder, the rock star mentality is, can go, towards the dark side or vice versa. Because it's really something, because you feel really, really seen, heard, and validated.
One of the things that's nagging about the Allen Iverson speech is that when you look it up on YouTube, I think at least the first 3 or 4 things that pop up don't include the comments that he makes after the most famous part of it. And when you're making a show like this, you don't get commentary. We have interviews and stuff, but you just have to trust that what's on the screen is going to work. So the way that you approach that in the moment and shoot it and write it and set the tone is just instrumental to whether or not it works within the way that people watch it. And that's just kind of an amazing thing that, it all comes together as well as it did.
And that was the first thing that kind of went viral. And Bill's, kindly spoken about this, but, Bill wasn't sure Bill Lawrence wasn't sure what to make of it, because he was kind of like, do you want like one of the people to go, is that the Allen Iverson speech? And I was like, no, like, if they get it, they get it. If they don't, they don't, because it's in that Monty Python way, it's earned. Like you want Ted, I wanted Ted to yell at this fucking kid. Like, he needed some hard love, after that advice that Keeley gives him in 102, like, he responds to praise, but we don't know, the audience doesn't know where Jamie came from. They find out because of this moment. And sometimes, you follow your gut. Sometimes your gut leads you, and that's what it's doing to Ted. And it works out. And then you have, the twist at the end.
Tell you what, do me a favor. When you get out there, set the cones so the other reserves can do a little passing drill.
You want me to set up cones?
I really appreciate it.
Bill wasn't sure about it. And I was just like, I think it'll work. I think it'll work. And that's just something I got good at from SNL. Lauren was always open. Like, if you believe in the thing, fight for it. If you believe in it, tell me why, explain it why. And Bill, much like Lauren, was like, okay, if you believe in it, yeah, all right, let's do it. And so then AJ and I, really went in, dug in on the editing of it, and, making those choices, like to put that like raked angle in there.
Right. Yeah.
Like where it gets really jarring and you're seeing a side of Ted you hadn't seen before. It's like, so here's a shot you haven't seen before in the show. Like it was really neat to see people pick up on that. And it's been really great to hear about people sharing Alan's story. It's an amazing moment. And one of the themes of the show is enough people put you in a box, you start to believe, oh, that's the box I belong in. And he always fought against that. Oh, he changed the way, in the generation prior, Michael Jordan changed NBA culture. Allen Iverson changed it for what you see now.
when you're just the performer, like when you're just stepping into Ted's shoes and he's living in that moment, does he know that he's making that reference? Like, does he know that he's connecting to what's happening with Allen Iverson, or is this just what spills out of him in the moment? Because, you know, he's also got his own stuff going on leading up to that scene. Like, he's got a lot that he's processing in that moment.
I mean, that's the intention. That's where we leave the intention behind. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that that moment didn't occur in real life. There's moments like that. And there's, I can think of several. I think we really maybe overindulged ourselves in that in season 2, where just taking moments. And again, not because of the success of this, it's just something that I personally have always liked in writing. I mean, I used to do it on SNL sketches all the time, where you use like a couplet that's from a different moment in a different context. And it's like just an homage. I mean, we do it, you know, like it's 100% intentional. Ted says, you know, only one thing left to do it in the final episode, you know, win the whole fucking thing, because, you know, that's a tip of the hat, a more deliberate actual tip of the hat to, like, you know, Major League, which was obviously a big influence on the initial idea here.
The teams that get relegated, they can get unrelegated, yeah.
They can get promoted.
So the next year we get ourselves a promotion, which looks good on any resume. Then we come back to this league and we do something that no one believes we could ever do. Win the whole fucking thing. There you are.
It always felt like playing Ted Lasso would be, it would just sap your energy in like a very big way, because of how positive he is at least 80% of the time, but then also knowing, you know, kind of the loneliness that he's dealing with and the kind of isolation that he's dealing with being across the pond and new to that area and all of that. I wanted to know how it compared, because you spent so much time on SNL, you know, building up to that show every week, and that takes a level of energy and that takes a level of preparation. But sustaining a character like this and living in that mindset of Ted as the positive, always like energetic, always up person, does that take it out of you? Like, is that a different kind of, I guess, actorly workout?
If anything, it's intoxicating. A former improv teacher, Sharna Halpern, I remember she used to give notes about, she ran IO for years and years. Her and Del Close started that theater in Chicago, and it's all long form improvisation. She had this great note one time when me and my team, it was like a scene where people were playing drunk, and she's just like, be careful when you're playing drunk. I've seen so many people get hurt because when you pretend to be drunk, you kind of go in like almost like that, like you become like a method actor, because most people had been drunk, and so they will jump up on a chair and a table and do stuff that drunk people do and then hurt themselves, you know, as drunk people occasionally, a lot of times, you know, do when they get rowdy. So I think when you are playing someone that is that upbeat, that optimistic, it's sort of, you kind of take it on. I mean, again, it's part of the reason I chose the sunglasses that I do, is because those sunglasses, while not rose colored, they're orange tinted, but they make the bluers blue, they make the greeners green. Like the blue blocker commercials of my youth that used to be on like TBS or whatever, watching Growing Pain, you know, reruns. That's 100%, you know, intentional. And so his rosiness is something that I'd much rather keep coursing through my veins than, like, say, like at SNL, like the a-hole character, or like this movie I did, Anne Hathaway and I did with Nacho Vigalondo called Colossal, where I just had to play this real son of a gun, or, you know, a movie I did with Jessica Biel and Maisie Williams, where, you know, I had to play, you know, a bereaved, you know, widower. Like, those stick with you, and you go home and you feel angry or sad. This is, I mean, obviously there's some elements of great sadness going through Ted, but for the most part, it's a nice thing to feel, and you kind of like rise to the occasion.
Making quicker transitions from offense to defense. Y'all gotta start making your hellos goodbyes, you understand? Easiest way to get that done well is to do it well. But aside from that, gotta be in great shape, right? So we are all gonna run 2 laps around this field. Anyone who loses to me has to run 4 more. Let's go! Okay, come on. What you got?
Yeah, I'd prefer that over having to play, you know, something a lot
Right.
heavier. Yeah, for me personally, yeah. Especially at this point in my life, I mean, that was one of the impulses for doing the show, was, you know, to play an energy of out loud buffoonery or you know, snark or something, which was just something one had been done splendidly by you know, a dozen or more, you know, people leading up to that, but then it was also just something that I wasn't personally looking to do, and getting to do those commercials, it really, the first one certainly, but then the second one even more so, where it's like, oh, there's a joy to doing this, and it's just a character that I know and understand and can just, you know, dip into, you know, willfully and joyfully.
Kind of taking that part of the gig and channeling it through the phenomenon of Ted Lasso, because so many people have really clinged onto it as a burst of joy, like this really positive, experience. Has that changed how it is for you, like out in the world? Like, are people walking up to you and calling you Ted and expecting you to respond like Ted? And do you have to kind of carry the character a little bit longer than, just when you're on the set?
What's crazy is because the bulk of the reception of the thing, especially from mid-August to when I left, the States to go back to the UK, we're in lockdown the whole time. So like, I'd be out front taking out the trash and a car would come by and go, "Hey, love the show." And you're like, "Hey, love your taste," like whatever you're like, "Thank you," or whatever, you try to, you just do. So I was kind of atrophied into it. And then in the UK, it was just work, and it was shut down until like about the last 6 weeks we were there. Then when we did go out, half the face was covered, specifically the mustache. So it was like,
there you go. Yeah.
Haven't really dealt with it yet. But then literally the second landing, the TSA guy was like, "I appreciate you." And I was like, "Wait, is he just doing a TED thing, or is he just, I don't know. I've been lucky enough to be working and doing movies for a while. I never know where it's coming from, or if they even know exactly who I am. They might have me confused with someone else. So I take it all with a grain of salt. But now they're saying the words back, but I got no problem with that. Like, if people, Ted, because there is so much of that character that is, parts of myself that I, personally don't mind being at the forefront of my being. The fact that folks have responded to it has really, really been something else. We all feel that. The fact that people, thank us and rewatch the show and families watch it together, especially with some of the content, like the language, as a guy who's proudly, my father took me to go see Beverly Hills Cop when I was 9 years old in the theater, to like the amount of F-bombs that people are getting and knowing that they're watching it with their 9-year-olds, or their grandparents and everybody in the same room is again, if I would have saw that in a crystal ball, I probably would have picked the thing up and shattered it and said, what is this black magic? Get out of my house. I wouldn't believe that.
When you went to make season 2, and you mentioned how everybody kind of, got to share in this on the set and with the crew and with the cast and everything, do you feel like that's a presence as well? Like, do you feel kind of a responsibility to consider the feedback that you've gotten and to consider what Ted Lasso has become for people? Or is that just a bonus that you kind of keep outside the door? Like, do you worry about the phenomenon, I guess, encroaching on what you've already started making?
I personally do not. Great deal of like, first, the 3 seasons were ruminating, bouncing around in my head for a long time, even in other iterations that, it's not even necessarily this project, but just the themes of it and sort of the way by which we are, attempting to make the show. And so again, the intentionality was already set by the pilot episode. And then the fact that we actually broke pretty much all of, a 10 episode arc, the Apple added 2 episodes after the fact. And we had to really sit and mull, like, how are we can we add 2 episodes, because we already knew what the story was. And so then we found, I think, hopefully, an appropriate way to add those 2 episodes and not mess with or pull the thread on the narrative of the second season. But it didn't change at all. We would talk about it a little bit, but it did not change at all based on the reception. And that's not that we weren't paying attention to it, but it's also a little bit like, oh, the story is what it is. We weren't aiming season 1, so it would feel, and if people were willing to hop in the boat and ride along with us, then hopefully they feel the same way this time, because I think they care about the characters. I think we really blessed with Theo Park, our casting director, and then the actors, everybody being able to lean in and really take over these characters from the writers and the producers and make them their own, and then leave enough space there for the audience to lean into them themselves. And I've always felt that as you get to know certainly someone in real life, but then if you get to know a character, those little victories matter as much as they do with your friends. You can see someone going through something, and just the example I always give is having that friend that's gone through a bad breakup and being at the bar with them and seeing their phone ring, and the person that's, says do not call, do not answer, or something like that, and seeing them hit, instead of getting up and going to take the call, "I'll be right back, I'll be 5 minutes," and then like an hour later they come in, you're like, "Is everything all right?" Like, no. And you have to go through that with them. And not that it's not important, but this is like seeing them just send the call, send a voicemail, is like, that's as big as, stopping a meteor hitting the earth, with if that person well enough. So we just want to give that fullness to these characters, and we try to do that from the writing side. I know we try to do the actors do it on the acting side, and so it didn't change much. It didn't, or at all, really, to be honest with you.
Sam, do you remember what animal has the shortest memory?
A goldfish.
That's right. That's a goldfish. Sam, what do you think we should all do once we get done being sad and or angry about this situation?
I think we should all be a goldfish.
I agree. Let's be sad now. Let's be sad together. And then we can be a gosh darn goldfish.
I don't know if how much, you studied or seen improv, but they always talk about finding the game in the scene. And the game in the scene is usually what the hook is, like what the joke is about, and a lot of times when early on you're coached, encouraged, the game of the scene is the first laugh. Find the laugh, once you get that first laugh, recognize where it came from, and then like heighten that thing. And there's just a little bit of me that doesn't, I mean, by the time I moved to Chicago from Kansas City, I'd been working like, professionally, whatever, like doing sketch and improv. And I didn't care about finding that laugh. It was kind of like, no, what's the one after it? And so, kind of a dickhead move for a 21-year-old, but, at 45, it's allowed me the space to sort of, answer the laugh within, or like the Greek chorus of friends, or like sort of, guardian angels that sort of surround me, that when a joke is made, it's like I can feel it, like, oh, that works, let's follow that. And then hopefully people get it or they don't, and you kind of like, shockingly, more people seem to get it.
I mean, like you said earlier, you always have to listen to those angels and just hope they step in at the right time. So that makes a lot of sense.
You also have to let them step in. That's the thing you have control over. I got no control over the angels, but I can at least listen to them when they show up.
Well, thank you for making the time for me. I've kept you a little bit long, but I really appreciate it. So good luck with season 2. I can't wait to see it. And yeah, thanks again.
All right, we'll see you soon.